when I'm expanding this div, it is having some scripts, it is having some spans, it is having some so and so, so and so. That is how the page is getting rendered. So this is called as the tree structure representation of your web page. Okay, internally, browser is going to create the tree structure representation of your web page, where every element we call it as a DOM element. What do you mean by DOM element? Element which is participating within the DOM structure, we call that guy as a DOM element. Like script tag is one of the DOM element. Okay. Now, now, if I ask you a question, every web page is going to have the DOM structure. Yes, if you go here, when I'm inspecting to the Google page, it is having its own DOM structure. You see, parent tag is HTML, child is header part and body tag. When I'm expanding the body, it is having some div, script, etc. So and so, so and so. If I keep on expanding, it will be keep on increasing. Okay. In the same way, Flipkart is having its own DOM structure. Now, if I ask you a question, every web page is having a DOM structure. Yes, but is the DOM structure of every web page is going to be same? No, it depends upon the content what you are showing. The parent level HTML header and body is going to be same for every web page. But under the header, I may go with some different tags. Under the body, someone else will go with a different tag based on the content what they are rendering on the page. Now, you know what generally happens is in case of your React.js, if I go with these components under your product details, when I'm clicking on this product data, assume like details instead of laptop, I say something called as some mobile. Once you come back, how do you start your project? npm start. When I say npm start, what is the file it is going to invoke? Package.json. Under the package.json, we have mentioned what do you mean by start, right? Now, when I click on enter, so now you see React scripts has come into the picture. What is React scripts? Bundler. What is the help we are taking from this bundler now? Live server. It is creating the temporary live server for us. Is React script is the only bundler? No, we have many bundlers. Like, look into the book. White, bun, parcel, webpack, etc. Okay, now if you see, it has run this guy. Now you see localhost 3000 is the one what it got. Now when I go with the product details, mobile is the one which got updated. Now in future, for example, when I'm taking this price instead of 2000, let us say something called as some 5000 got updated. In the background, automatically 5000 is getting updated. Boss, without refresh, how it is happening? Live server. What is the difference between the web server and the live server? Live server is it is just streaming the in the background, automatically UI gets updated. Okay. Now, the question is, when this value is getting updated from 4000 to 5000, in future, I will even show you what is like, okay, this is one-way data binding, but two-way data binding, you need to get updated. I will create one simple example, guys. Components. I want to create a separate component here. It is recommended to go with a separate folder. I'll say two-way data binding. Under that, I'm creating a separate file, which is two-way data. It is JS file. Now, how do you create a component? I want to create a new component. How do you go for everyone? Function. What is the name of the component? Name of the component should start with uppercase. I say that demo two-way data binding. Okay, anytime you're creating a component, first of all, check whether it is working or not. Instead of directly writing the logic of your component, check whether the component is working fine or not. I'll simply say return So this is what we generally do, right? Return, a method has to be written. I say div, I say that demo component. Okay, let us save this. Now, where do I render this demo component, this guy? It has to be rendered on your main page, which is your index.js. Under this, we have visiting card for multiple times. I'm removing one of the visiting card and I have product details. Along with this, I will say that you need to even render this DOM two-way data binding, and I'll just close this. But the problem is, do you know what I mean by two-way data binding for this page? No. Do I need to import? I need to say something called as import two-way data binding from so and so. Clear, everyone? Okay, but one more thing, when you are doing the import, does it need to be exported? Yes, right? So it has to be export default this component. Now let us save this, come back over here, and you see that still compilation happening. You see your bundler is doing the compilation also. And now you should able to see this demo component got rendered. Okay, for now, I will even comment out this guy, visiting card and product details. I'm just removing and keeping over here. Okay, so that I can see only our way of our piece of component. I will remove this. Okay, so this is what your demo component which is getting rendered. Now what I do is I say uh, under this two-way data binding, for example, I say that user name is equal to Mr. Chris. Okay, this is a simple username what I'm giving. My expectation is I want to show this username on the page. I'll say some H3. Okay, I'll say demo or else two-way data binding. And I will say that say some div username is hyphen. If at all I have to show the username here, I'll directly write this. Now when I save it, come back, reload. Why this two-way data binding is coming like this? Because H3, you have created the syntax, right? Under your, where is your styles? I think under your product details, product.css, where we added the CSS. Under public, under your index.html, you have added H3 something like this. That is the reason complete page is coming like this. So instead of H3, let us say H4. Okay, so this is how two-way data binding username is username. Why the reason it is showing like username? My expectation is to see the value, right? Why it is not showing the value? Speak out, guys. JSX. Come on, why the reason? If you know, you need to speak out. Why? Come on, no one knows it? Who knows this? Why the reason it is? Sorry? In a expression. I already said you, if something need to be evaluated, right now you have given like username is. Now for you, man, React might think that this user is also one of the variable name. Name is also one of the variable name. To also one of the variable name. Now how do I say that it is not a variable name? It is a string. Directly you give this data. If you give the direct group of characters, it will feel like it is string. I'm not going to do any binding here. But when you want to evaluate this guy, boss, username is not just the uh, string what I'm going to add. Instead, there is something called it is a variable name. You need to go to the variable name, get the value, inject the value, not the variable name. Now, how do I tell to the React? It has to be an expression. Whenever you keep any piece of code within the open and closed flower braces, that will become a expression. Expression in the sense, thing which will be evaluated by your React. So evaluation in the sense, can I do some mathematical evaluation also here? Everyone? Yes, we have seen that. Okay. Now when I say expression, this is how it is coming like markers. So this part we already discussed from your features. Where is our running notes? So from your core features, which is your data binding, which is going to come for us. Okay, so this is one-way data binding, we call it as. There is a very good question. People will ask you, is React JS is supporting one-way data binding or two-way data binding? It only supports the one-way data binding. What do you mean by one-way data binding? The data variable, whatever you create in JavaScript, that is the one which can be directly reflected on your HTML. You could able to retrieve the data directly. What do you mean by two-way data binding? Two-way data binding in the sense, for example, I say enter user name is equal to, I say input, I say input type is equal to say some text. Why the reason it is throwing an error? In your React fragment. What do you mean by fragment? Everything is paid under the one single parent. So this is what we call it as a HTML fragment. Now under the React fragment, you cannot have any element which is not having a closing tag. In your HTML, it was an optional for us. In your HTML, we used to, it's an optional. Either you give the closing tag or you don't give the closing tag. DOM is getting created. But in case of your React, it is very much mandatory that either you need to have a closing tag or it should be a self-closing tag. But without closing, you cannot write any of your HTML. So this is what we call it as a fragment. Clear? Now, when I'm saying this input element, so this is how you got. Now I'm going to write something called as my name or enter the username, Mr. something called as Chris. My expectation is this Chris value has to automatically go and update this username. Okay, one-way data binding is data what you have in your JavaScript is getting reflected directly in your HTML without any DOM operations. You're not doing any DOM operations. We have created this sample.html, right? In case of your sample.html, whenever I have to retrieve this okay, I have removed that. So in case of your normal JavaScript, for example, there is a variable called as username in your JavaScript. If at all I have to retrieve in your HTML, what I have to do, document dot get element by ID, so and so dot inner HTML is equal to that username. But here what we are doing, we are not doing any DOM operations. We are directly retrieving the variable directly to your HTML. You're binding it. This is what we call it as one-way data binding. React only supports the concept of one-way data binding. Boss, if that is the case, I'm giving the value. I'm saying something called a Chris. Now this username has to get updated. Or instead of username, I will say that where user country is equal to empty. Okay. And whatever this enter user country, save this. Now, whatever the country, I say something called as India, automatically that variable has to be updated. Okay. Now say, for example, this country name, I'm going to keep some another div. Okay, and I say that country name is hyphen something called as country name. Now when I come back here, boss, why the reason country name is not showing? Because this variable is not having anything, boss. Now, if that is the case, now what when I have to see this country name to be updated, now I am updating this country name, say something called as India. In the background, what I am expecting is it has to automatically read this India, update that user country name. So that is what we call it as a two-way data binding. When you go to your frameworks like your Next.js or your Angular, they directly support the concept of two-way data binding, but React doesn't support the two-way data binding. So is it like we can't achieve it? We can still achieve it. There is a concept of event handling using which you could able to achieve this guy. Okay, I will show you because we haven't yet discussed anything called as hooks, concepts, etc. But I want to show you that what is two-way data binding. Okay, just for information I'm showing because I'll take a separate class. Like what do you mean by hooks? How do you implement this event handling? How do you do this two-way data binding? I'll show you, but as the topic has come, I'll show you that what is two-way data binding happening here. Now, in case of this two-way data binding, my expectation is whenever user add any value to this input element, automatically user country has to be updated. Okay, so in that case, what I have to do is I have to say constant something called as country is the one which I need to go for. I mean, I need to create it as a state variable. We will again discuss what do you mean by state and all. I'll discuss this. Now, instead of this user country, I'll say it as user country. I'll say set user country, something like this, which is an empty. Initially, I'm keeping this user country value as empty. Okay, now what I'm going to do is on change handle value change is the method, and I'm going to write a function handle value change event like this. Set user country as event.target.value. Yeah, my job is done. Now let us come back here. Let's reload the page. It is going to throw me an error. Okay. Import React from React. I have used one of the method called as useState, which is coming from your React. Obviously, I need to import it. Now, once you reload, this is again the same guy. Now, if you see, initially, my country name is empty. Now, if you see here, I'm going to update my country name. India. Is the data binding is happening in the background? I mean, I have a variable called as username, boss. Whenever I do any changes in your UI, automatically this guy is getting updated to this variable name. So this is what we call it as two-way data binding. So boss, if you really have these type of features, do you need any type of DOM operations? Why the reasons we go with the DOM operations like your document.get element by ID, get a query selectors, inner HTML, set styles, etc. things and all. The reason is dynamically updating the UI, dynamically reading the data and creating the object and all. But if I have these things like your data binding, automatically data binding, at the same time two-way data binding, automatically reading the data, why the reason we will be going with all the DOM operations? Imagine the same thing has to be achieved using your plain JavaScript or so. Obviously, you can, I mean, you can, but it will be taking a lengthier piece of code. The reason why industries are asking the people for moving or upgrade to your React.js is these are the advanced features. So you as a developer use these features and develop the things more faster, boss. That is the reason people go with this libraries. In the background, is React.js is doing any magics? No, he's actually doing the JavaScript logic only. But you as a developer don't need to bother. You just make use of the advantages what it is providing. Are we clear? Okay, as I said you, this two-way data binding, I'm going to clearly explain you later, but I want to show you that it is not just only retrieving the JavaScript data onto the page, but the data what I'm giving onto the HTML can also be automatically going back and getting updated on the JavaScript variables. That is what we call it as a two-way data binding. This is one of the Core feature, as I mentioned, two-way data binding. This is a good interview question. People logically they will ask that is two-way data binding is supported? No, React is not directly supporting it. Can't we achieve it? We can achieve it using something called as event handling concept. Okay. Now the reason why I have gone for this two-way data binding showing structure is, boss, when you come to your DOM, what is going to happen under your DOM? There is something called as HTML tag. Under that, there is something called as a header tag. Under that, there is something called as title. There could be something called a script tag. There should be something called as some styles, etc. And under the HTML, we might even have some body. Under that, there could be some div. Under that, so and so. There could be some span. Under that, there could be some anchor tag, etc., etc. This is how the body structure is. When I'm coming to our body structure, I mean our DOM body structure, if you inspect this guy, you see this is the div, and under that there is something called as input element, and there is some div. Under that there is something called as username. There is another div. There is something called as user country. Okay, now this is the DOM structure what you have given. For example, when I am updating the user country to something called as I, what the React.js has to do? Do I need to go to the DOM structure and I need to update the country name as capital I? When I say something called as IN, because in your text box, under your text box, dynamically you're updating something called as INDIA. Now, whenever I say something called as I am updating it on the UI, isn't it? When I am something called as N here, React is updating IN, isn't it? When I am something called as D, automatically React is updating on the DOM structure. The changes, whatever you could able to see, when I say something called USA, automatically my DOM is also getting updated. So DOM is dynamically getting updated. Are we doing it or React is automatically doing it? React automatically doing that. But you know the problem what we have is every time you're updating the DOM structure, the page is taking some too much of time to render it. At the same time, right now you have user country. What if I have 10 fields? Okay, I have something called as 10 variables. I need to update country, I need to update age, I need to update your pin code, I need to update your address. So every time React is updating the DOM structure, re-render is going to happen on the page. Re-rendering of the DOM structure. So complete tree is getting re-rendered. Boss, if the re-render is happening, is my performance is getting degraded? Yes. So to avoid this, what React.js will do is he is going to use a concept, something called as virtual DOM. Okay, the most important concept in your React.js, which is heart of your React.js, which we call it as a React DOM. What do you mean by React? Oh, sorry, which is called as virtual DOM. What do you mean by virtual DOM? What React do logically is whenever user is giving the DOM structure something like this, what I will do is I take a copy of this DOM structure. I say it is virtual DOM and I'm going to update the virtual DOM. And I mean, what I'm doing is user has given this page. I take a copy of this DOM structure. I'm keeping with me. Whenever I need to update the values within the DOM, instead of doing on the main page, I will be doing inside your virtual DOM. For example, user is something called as he is saying. I generally don't update in the main DOM. I will be doing under your virtual DOM. The advantage is I am taking a copy. Whenever I'm doing the changes on the virtual DOM, page is not re-rendering, boss. User is getting a feel like it is page, I mean, it is happening automatically. But in the background, what I'm doing, I took a copy of it. Here I'm going to do the change. User is not getting any affected over there. Now later, once all the changes are done, I will take this virtual copy. I will replace with your original DOM structure. Are we clear? So, I mean, it's so straightforward. For example, I want to practically what we can say is, for example, there is a form. Okay, there is a form, for example, I have given to him, boss, you need to fill it. Now, whenever he is filling the form, every time you see that, I mean, assume like his form is visible on the screen. Now, when it is visible, what all his character, assume like his name is Raj, he's saying like R, you could able to see R, he's saying A, he could able to see. Now, my expectation is don't show everything. Instead of that final values, whatever he has filled, that is what I want to see. Now, what I'm going to do, his form, instead of showing the main form is been shown on the page, but I take a copy of it, I give it to him, you fill this copy of this. Now, when he is filling this virtual copy, it is not been reflected. Once he is done with all the changes, take this, replace with your original DOM. My job is done. So how many times re-rendering has happening? Only one time. Okay, so this is what the concept of your virtual DOM. What React has done is, instead of doing the changes on the actual DOM structure, if I do it on the actual DOM structure, re-rendering is going to happen multiple number of times. To avoid that, we will be going with the virtual DOM concept. Virtual DOM is take a copy of your actual DOM, do the changes over there, and replace this virtual DOM with your actual DOM later. Are we clear up to this? Okay, online. Any questions? Then can we say DOM was updated only one from virtual DOM? Yes, we can do that. Now, again, obviously, internally, what React is going to have is it is not going to say that, okay, after 5 minutes of time, after 10 seconds of time, because you may ask me a question. If that is the case, when I'm saying I, how come it is getting updated I? I need to wait until I and DIA, right? But it does React doesn't know that what is the value you're giving. It is having some set of time. Okay, it is having some fraction of seconds of time in between. If there are some variables, right now you have one single user country, but in between you may do some 100 variables or 200 variables. I will wait for all those. Then the DOM will be replaced with this. Okay. Then React will support two-way ending as well, right? Swati, as I said, React directly doesn't support the two-way data binding. Okay, if someone asks that, if you see here, I have achieved the React two-way data binding by using the concept of event handling. Through event handling, I can achieve that feature. If you want it, I can achieve it. But directly, I'm not doing it, right? In case of your one-way data binding, have I done anything? No. Take the value, keep inside the expression, React is showing the value. But in the same way, I could able to do with your two-way data binding? No, I am taking something called as on change. On change, I'm taking the value. I'm updating the state variable. Indirectly, I'm achieving the two-way data binding. So that is the reason interviewers will ask you that, is React is supporting it? Not directly. Can we achieve it? Yes, indirectly through event handling concept. Okay. Okay. Parameshwar, how virtual DOM will be synced with actual DOM changes? That is what your React is going to do, right? Now, if you ask me a question, I mean, one of the React features, how the DOM is getting updated, how the one-way data binding are updated. That is why I'm depending on the React JS boss. He is having his own internal logic of when to update the DOM structure, making sync of the parent actual DOM and the virtual DOM. So that is being taken care by the React compiler. Ganesh, will virtual DOM execute only once? That depends, Ganesh. Depends on the number of variables. Now you have 100 variables. At a time, you can't change all the 100 variables, right? It will be like you'll be changing one by one by one. So any number of times the variables are changing, automatically DOM gets updated. It is not like only one. But it will make sure, for example, when I say I here, for example, in this page, I said I. How many times virtual DOM been pasted on the actual DOM? One time. Now I say N. How many times it has happened? Second time. Now I say D. Now when it is faster, I say something called INDIA. In that case, React makes sure that one time or two times within the fraction of seconds, it is going to get updated. But I mean, one simple straight line answer to this is when React is doing some binding changes, taking the data, updating the DOM structure, I don't do it directly on the main. I do it on the virtual DOM. What is virtual DOM? I took a copy of it. Here I'm doing the changes, I'm pasting it later. Okay, but it is so fast that your human eye cannot catch it, but internally that is how it is happening. I mean, the other thing is there is a concept of something called as state values, etc. and all. Whenever you keep on updating it, the component has to be completely re-rendered. So to avoid that, React is doing this guy. If we are updating the multiple fields, it will create multiple copies of the virtual DOM. That's a good question. Okay, what Pallavi is saying is, boss, you might have 10 fields. Now, when I'm doing the changes on the one field, do you think that one copy of the virtual DOM is there, two copy of the virtual DOM is three copy of the virtual DOM? No, because if I take the first field and if I do the change, if I'm replacing this guy, second field will be missing. Virtual copy, virtual DOM structure is going to be one. Whatever the fields it is, I keep updating on the one virtual DOM itself. We are not creating multiple virtual DOMs. I mean, React is not creating multiple virtual DOMs. Clear, Pallavi? Madhuri, can you say React supports two-way data binding with the help of, yeah, that is what I'm saying, right? If the interviewer will ask you, like I myself asked the interview question saying that, boss, is React is supporting two-way data binding? No, is the answer. Can I achieve it? Yes, is the answer. How? Using event handling. Okay. Only on change is responsible. Again, I'm saying, Shivangi, I'm not saying that on change is responsible for two-way data binding. Using on change, I'm achieving that two-way data binding concept. You may achieve it using on change, you may achieve it using on focus, on blur. It's up to you. I mean, that's a different logic. Can you please add it to the running notes? Yeah, I will add it. Sumant, what if 10 fields we need to fill and same time we are showing the UI like country? In that case, DOM render every time, right? Or it should want until fields getting filled. No, no, that's what, right? Sumant, for you, you said like India is there. In the same way, uh, let me take another field. Enter user age. Input type is going to be number. Handle age change. So what I have to do is I need to say user age and set user age and so and so. Now I say set user age as event.target.value. Okay, now let us reload the page. Am I showing the user age on the page? No. Do Okay, this is how it is. I have the age value, I have the country name. When I'm coming to the age, I say 30. It is getting updated. I may say country name, something called as India. This is updated. I may say age, something called as 90. It is getting updated. Now, is it is one time it is happening? Is it is waiting until the country name change is going to happen? No. I mean, at a time when you do multiple changes, how it is getting updated on the page. Another part is majorly this virtual DOM will be right now what is happening is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Whenever I'm writing any of the single character, virtual DOM is getting updated on the page. In general, this virtual DOM is more helpful when you are binding the data from the API. Say, for example, I'm hitting one of the server is throwing me the data response saying that okay, product details are so and so. Now this data has to be updated on the page. Now React knows that in this case, React doesn't know that how many characters you're going to give. React doesn't know that are you done with this or not. But in that case, React knows that okay, I got the data from the server. Now this data has to be binded onto the UI. Now the data pasting or data binding I will be doing under the virtual DOM. Am I clear? Hope everyone is understanding things. Okay. Who asked this question? Hope I'm clear. Okay, Shivangi, can you explain virtual DOM dramatically? Okay, diagrammatically, sorry. Okay, diagrammatically, this is what we have, right? Diagrammatically, in the sense, if you see, this is what I have created. Now, this is the actual DOM what you have. Whenever I'm going to do the change of so and so, I'm not doing this actual DOM changes. Instead, I'm doing on the virtual DOM. Now I say INDIA. I'm updating over here. Later, but now, until and unless I update the actual DOM, user doesn't see this. Now later, after I finish all the updating, I copy this DOM and I will be pasting with your actual DOM. Copy, paste. That's it. Am I clear, Shubhangi? Okay. Sonali, event handling, use square braces and data binding. No, no, forget about that, Sonali, because like I haven't discussed anything about the event handling. Only you talk about data binding. Even data binding, don't go with the statement something like data binding with flower brace. Flower brace is an expression. Expression indicates I need to evaluate something. Evaluation could be mathematical operation. Evaluation could be getting the value and injecting onto the page. Okay. Swati, in that case, if we use multiple fields, it will take time to show on the UI. That is the responsibility of the React to make it more faster. That's a good question. What she's saying is, what if you have 100 fields? It will be taking too much of time. But that is the responsibility of your React to make it more faster. Okay, and he could able to do that. And again, as I said, you right, instead of and at a time, do you think that multi 100 fields are there on the page? Do you think that at a time you can modify all the 100 fields? No, right? On fraction of seconds, like it'll be having a gap. So, as I said, you majorly the React or virtual DOM will be coming into the picture whenever you have the backend data and that data is getting rendered on the page. So, in that case, you could able to see the virtual DOM is playing a bigger role here. At one time, the virtual DOM will do. It will not be like every time. Okay. Pallavi, after every field change, again, Pallavi, it is not the concept of field change here, value change. It could be from the UI, it could be from the backend, it could be anywhere. I don't see mic option to talk today, my first class. Suraj, as this is the demo class meeting ID, they have not yet changed the meeting. I mean, maybe sooner they will be creating. I think Sukanya can help out. Sukanya, please let me know like when the meeting ID is going to change. So the time when we have that original meeting ID, the registered meeting ID, right? Then you should able to unmute yourself. Hi, sir. Like it will take copy and paste. You liked it? Okay, Avinash, how will React knows if I'm completed or not? But here, Avinash, do you think that it is really waiting for this? Now, when I say something called as I, automatically is getting updated, right? So in a fraction of second, it will make sure. I mean, it has its own uh, time frame, making sure that what time it is going to re-render the page. As I said, you right again. Here is might not be the right example when we have the data from the API, okay, and it is getting updated on the page. In that case, it will be more better. You will be understanding. Okay. At that time, anyway, I'll going to show you. Like I'll be using something called a fetch method. I'm creating an Ajax call. Through Ajax call, I'm getting some data and I'm getting rendered on the page. Now, how faster it is. Now, instead of rendering one by one by one, it will make sure one single paste. Okay. Can we see virtual copy of your debugger window? No. Actually, actually, that's a good question. When you go to your React, right, there is something called as React debugging tools. I have already installed this. It is possible. Okay, I will show that. Uh, this is the Shadow DOM. You guys know what I mean by Shadow DOM? Okay, Shadow DOM here. Allow, you see Shadow DOM. Now, what do you mean by Shadow DOM is, for example, anyway, this is out of topic, just want to discuss. For example, when I say under your two-way data binding, if I say div input type is equal to date time. Okay. Now, if you see here, when I, right, input type equal to date will automatically create a calendar. When I open the calendar, I could able to see this. Is these are also part of the DOM? They are. Anything what you see on the web page has to be part of the DOM. But if it is part of the DOM, when I'm inspecting this guy, when you inspect this, when you click on this guy, I see only input type equal to date. Then where is this calendar? Where is the DOM structure, etc. things and all? Those guys will be created under the shadow DOM. Okay, the DOM which will not be visible on the page. If you really have to see the shadow DOM, go to the settings. Under that, there is an option of show the user agent shadow DOM. Boss, when you're showing the DOM structure, you make sure you will show the shadow DOM also for me. Now, when I'm click on shadow DOM, now if you click on this, now when you see input guy has become a parent now. Under this, now when I open this, you see this is the shadow root. Now it will be having its own whatever the look and feel we have, right? This all will be part of this. So in the same way, virtual DOM is also something what React is following. Instead of doing any changes on the actual DOM, I'll be directly doing on the shadow DOM just to increase the performance of the page. Are we clear, guys? How to debug the React code line by line? Is it is possible to do that? Yes, it is possible to do that. There is something called as a React debugging tool. Those are all things I'll be discussing. Okay, going forward, we have not yet actually started the things, guys. We are only talking about the basic core concepts. Then we start going into the React part. Okay. Any more questions? Why the different reason to show shadow DOM elements separately? The reason is to not to, I mean, these elements are being created by the browser, not by the user, right? Now, when I say that, now what is her question is, boss, why the reason the shadow DOM element by defaultly not shown? Boss, this input element developer has added it. It is part of the DOM. But when I'm opening this calendar, is user has created it? No, that's the one which is by defaultly created by your HTML. So that is the reason it has been kept as a different part. But what if user asks that I want to see that? That is how they are showing an option to see the shadow DOM also. Clear, Swati? What is event dot target dot value? Avinash, you should able to know this when you guys are talking to when you are implementing your DOM HTML things. If you guys remember, there is something called as document dot query selector, something called as hash abc dot oh, you're talking about event, right? Okay, so there is something called as event dot target. Event dot target. What do you mean by event? A predefined object automatically gets generated whenever an action happens on the page. You might be knowing this. When you're talking about your DHTML concepts in your JavaScript, there is something called as event object. When you click on it, event object created. When you blur on it, event objects created. I mean, event is the predefined object automatically gets created whenever you do any action on the web page. So under that event object, target is a predefined property. What do you mean by event dot target? Target indicates the current element on which event got fired. Okay, for example, on button, you're clicking it. Event dot target in the sense button. On text box, you are selecting it. Event dot target is the text box, the DOM element on which event got fired. Clear? Now that is what I'm doing. You see, under the event, I mean, take the value, you have to set the user age. What is that age? Event dot target. I mean, the element on which event got fired, which event handle is changed. Under that, whatever the value is there, you get it and set it as a user age. That is what the logic is. Okay, Siddhartha, today is the second day. I'm a little bit confused. I agree with your confused Siddhartha. That is the reason okay, sorry, Bhavna. So, Bhavna, what I suggest is please go through the videos what we have finished already. And mostly this Saturday, I'm going to take only the doubt session. I know that we have just started and it is 2 weeks of time, but as you guys are nearby, on Saturday, what I do is I don't take the regular class. I'll be taking only the doubt session so that I'll make sure whatever the doubts you have, I'll be clarifying. Again, you don't need to wait until Saturday. But Saturday I can repeat the things. If you have some doubt, what I suggest is go through the videos. Tomorrow you get me all the questions. But any topic, if you feel like something has to be repeated on Saturday, you let me know. I'm going to repeat the things. Am I clear, Bhavna? Swati, as this element having its own logic, then they are shown as shadow DOM elements. Not like own logic, its own look and feel also, right? Swati, the DOM, the elements which are getting created, for example, input type calendar, input type name, etc. things and all, even the DOM structure is also being created by own. User has not created it. Pallavi, what is diff algorithm? Why diff algorithm is coming over here? Okay, when the virtual DOM and actual DOM is comparing, that is where you're talking about, right, Pallavi? That is where you're talking about. Yes. So internally, right, again, that's a more deeper discussion. For example, what we are saying is, boss, HTML actual DOM is being taken. A actual DOM is there. We took the copy of this actual DOM. Now we are doing the changes. I mean, React is doing the changes on the virtual DOM. Now, when it is pasting back the virtual DOM into the actual DOM, is it is completely replacing and pasting? No, because if I completely replace and pasting, user will feel a look and feel something called page is getting white, again new thing is coming. Some field is again changing. I remove this actual DOM and I'm going to place it. Now, what is the best way internally React is following? So React internally follows a concept of diff algorithm. So what do you mean by this diff algorithm? I make sure to compare actual DOM with the virtual DOM. I mean, user has done the changes. Now I have my virtual DOM, I have my actual DOM. Now I will be comparing what element has been changed or what value has been changed. Based on the value comparison, whatever it is changed, that is the only thing I'm going to update instead of pasting the complete page again and again. I mean, it's a common thing, right? For example, I say that you took a copy of one book. Uh, you took a copy of one book and you pasted here. Now there are some changes on the book. Now, if at all this has to be replaced with this, instead of taking and replacing, you only take whatever being changed instead of taking the complete book there. So internally, React follows a diff algorithm concept, and the algorithm is so faster and so best way they have written that the things whatever you could able to see it on the pages more faster way. Okay, so these all are internal to the React. You don't need to bother on how the virtual DOM is getting created, how the comparison is going to create it, how this algorithm has been written. We don't need to. That's a feature he is providing. Make use of it. Did that answer your question, Pallavi? So you have not answered my question. Can we see virtual copy? Virtual for that I answered that, right, Swati? I mentioned that using your React developer tools we can do. Okay, we haven't yet discussed that. Once I discuss about the React developer tools, at the time I'm going to answer that. Am I clear, Swati? Yes, no, ma'am. Waiting for your answer. Any more questions? All good? Can I go forward? Okay. So, now, do you feel like this is one of the advanced feature of your React? It is. Okay, this is the one actually making the React more faster way of rendering the content. Okay, so the another part is again come back to your running notes. So we are good at virtual DOM. So here the concept of creating a of copy from actual DOM and doing data binding changes within the copy DOM, which is called as virtual DOM. Later, through diff algorithm, it will be updating. I mean, React will be updating React will be updating with virtual DOM content. Am I clear? So what actually you're doing is, it is the concept of creating the copy from your actual DOM and doing the data binding changes within within the copy DOM. Later, through the diff algorithm, React will be updating the actual DOM with the virtual DOM content. Okay, and we are good up to here. What is React Fiber? Those all things will come under when we discuss much more on the React features, Pallavi. Right now, we cannot discuss that. Okay, let's restrict our feature questions only regarding this so that we won't be deviating it. But yeah, I'll be talking about the React Fiber. Uh, Swati, only React will use diff algorithm or any other. Now, if we use this guy, right? I mean, when we are using when I'm saying the data binding, the concept of automatically getting the JavaScript data onto the HTML. If I ask you a question, is React is only one is React is only one who is providing this feature of data binding? Is Angular is not providing? Is Cane.js is not providing? Vue.js is not providing? They are also providing. Now, if I ask you a question that internally is the same logic what React is using and Angular is also using the same, that might be different, isn't it? So diff algorithm logic will be used by all the other frameworks also. But the logic or the algorithm what React might be using, React is using, that will not be the same because React developers have created the diff algorithm and will not be same with others. But they other languages or other frameworks or libraries also might be using the diff algorithm. Am I clear there? Am I clear, Swati? Okay, I missed the details. Shashank, please send the admin details. Sukanya, if you are there, could you please share your contact number? Or like anyone who is having Sukanya's number, please share it over here. Okay, so this is what we are. We are so clear with the components, JSX, virtual DOM, and data binding. The concept of uh, getting or retrieving JS variables directly to the DOM without using any DOM operations. Do you agree? So, what do you mean by this data binding? The concept of automatically getting the data from your JavaScript and directly rendering onto the page without doing any DOM operations. If I have to do this in general in your JavaScript or HTML, I have to do the DOM operations. But here we don't need to do any type of DOM operations. Okay. Next, so this is again the core feature of your React.js. These all are mandatory features. Now, what do you mean by server-side rendering concept? So this is a new concept which has been rendered from which has been supported from your React 19. What actually we have is the components not only from the client. Now, if you see this visiting card component, product details component, data binding component, is it is getting from the server or from the client side? Client is the one who is rendering this, but we can start rendering the components even at the server side. I mean, inside your Node.js server. I'm not saying that any of the web server. In Java, can I do? In .NET, I can do? No. In Python, I can do? No. If it is a Node.js server, you can render this component from the server itself. Server itself will bind that component and throw it back to you. Okay, that is one of the feature. We will see that. Mostly it will not be you. I mean, at least the parent component will be rendered by the server. Later remaining all will be done at the server side. That is how we follow. Mostly even I practically never use this in our real time because we are always going with the client side components, client side rendering component itself. But in future, I will show you at the maybe at the climax of your classes, I'll show you how the server side components are getting rendered. Okay, but this is one of the core concepts what React is providing. The concept of rendering the components while server is throwing data to the client. Okay, while the server is initially throwing the data back to the client, at that time itself, the component will be rendered from the server side itself. And fragmenting, everybody knows this. Okay, all the HTML content being rendered by a component. I'm only talking about the component here. Should be fragmented, which is binding under one single parent. Okay, and every element should have a closing tag. Clear everyone? So fragmenting is also one of the core feature what your React is supporting, where you could able to bind every elements into one single parent. You cannot have two children directly without having any parent. It is mandatory that we need to follow this fragmenting. Okay, and supporting of your routing concept, rendering components based on routing URL. Okay, so what do you mean by this routing? It is very simple. Okay, I have some questions. Bhavna, why we are using Node.js in your React.js? Good question. Did we answer this already? Did we answer this already, everyone? Yes, right? So we already did that, Bhavna. As I said, you right, it will be like a repetitive part. Please go through the recordings what been shared by Sukanya and go through with that. If you still have that question, please come back to me. I will answer that. Okay. Could you please repeat fragment? So Madhuri, what do you mean by fragment is, as we discussed, right? Whenever we are returning any HTML content from the component, this is what we call it as a fragment. A UI fragment or a component fragment is n number of elements binded under one single parent. Now, if I say return another div, something like this, some test, you see, this is going to be an error for us. You cannot return multiple elements from your component. It has to be one single parent. Under that, you can have any number of children. Now, I already discussed about this. What if like I want only one, I don't want this, I want directly H4 div and all. I don't want this div. Just for the namesake, I have added div. Now, instead of that, what I can go for? Empty fragment also can be done. Okay, I can just say just empty closing opening tag and empty closing tag. Okay, this also can be done. Hope I'm clear with your question, Madhuri. Sunil, what is rendering? Okay, so rendering is the concept of getting the content and the content getting pasted on the HTML, we call it as a rendering. So rendering is not a terminology, Sunil. It is just a normal English word. For example, I have this remote in my hand. There is a table. Now this remote is getting occupied on the table. So it is called as rendering, right? So something getting occupied on the page or which is taking its space on the page, we call it as a rendering. Am I clear, Sunil? Swati, what that is like rule we need to follow, right? Why it is called as a feature? That is a feature. That is not like a rule, right? Rule being given. That is one of the feature what React is providing to make sure your DOM elements are being constructed well. Right, Swati? Now, what she's saying is, boss, that is a rule we need to follow. But is why it is coming under a feature? Because is it not forcing you to make the DOM elements in a right structure? Yes, right? So that is the reason it is a feature. Am I clear, Swati? Fragment is also one of the feature being provided by your React. Please send the admin details. Guys, can someone please message the Sukanya's number here if anyone is having Avinash. So that empty tag is a block element or inline element and how we can target in that CSS. That is what I said, Avinash. That will be like a empty tag. No meaning for this. If you really want to give a CSS, etc., give the parent element. When we give something like this, if we give something called as empty tag, the reason why I'm giving is to not to break the structure. I'm doing this. I mean, I'm satisfying the React concept or React requirement, but at the same time, I'm not going with an extra tag. If you say that, boss, I need to go with some CSS, etc., and all, you go with div tag or span tag, and then you go with all the CSS, etc. Either you want an inline element or you want a block level element, you define that element. Am I clear, Avinash? Shivangi, can you please elaborate server side rendering? Okay, so whenever I am getting something, for example, I keep anything called as some index.html from your server. Assume like this localhost 3000. When it is rendering these components, is this component got rendered? Now you see, this is index.html content only, right? Is this index.html content got rendered from the client side or from the server side? Client side, right? Server was giving only the HTML content. If you see the source code, this is what been given by the server. Server has not given that component rendering, binding, etc. things and all. But if I expect the server to do everything and give it back to me, that is called a server side rendering. So in that case, when you see the source code, here itself you will say that 10 into 5, which is 15. Sorry, 50. Okay? Am I clear? Who asked this? Shubhangi. Shivangi. Okay, yeah. Next, so Swati, only is called as a fragment or even when I say fragment, the concept of all the HTML elements getting rendered under the one single parent is called as a UI fragment. It is not just only empty tag. Even if I keep inside a div tag, this is also a fragment. This is a fragment of your component. Please brief on how API calls happen from the React. Parmeshwar, that's a very big concept. Later we are going to discuss. Why should I brief it? I will give you a lot of other information, not only brief. I haven't even discussed anything about it here. Okay, I'm just discussing about the core concepts of this, then I'll go step by step. And guys, I mean, whenever I'm saying that I'll talk it later, my intention is not to skip it. My intention is not to break the chain. I mean, we have a flow, right? If I talk about the how do we API, now I need to talk about fetching, etc. things and all. Now, instead of taking as a like one single, I mean, small feature, we'll have a separate discussion only on that. Okay, but I'll make sure I'll cover that previous videos as today is my first class. Sukanya, please ping the previous videos. If you see the previous chart, I mean, at the very starting chart, Narendra, she has already done that. But yeah, she will ping it again. Then binding, Sukanya, please share the videos also. So then binding, all these things are happening only in client side. Obviously, Madhuri, server never comes into the picture. Server only throws the data to the user. Everything else will be working inside your client side only. That is a default rule what we have while you're rendering your normal web pages. Same rule follows even if it is a React app also. Are we using SSD in your React in your real time? Server side rendering components you're saying, Ganesh? Or what do you mean by this SSD? Can you please elaborate? Chandra, can you please start React tomorrow onwards? Are we not talking React things in the class? Am I talking anything nonsense in the class? So, Chandu, instead of, I mean, these things, right? When you go with any libraries or something, on the day one, I start like, okay, what is component, data binding, etc. People don't understand. I mean, the first thing is being a web developer, you need to understand all the 360 degrees. When you're coming to the React, doesn't mean that on the day one I only start with. In fact, like we are talking about the React, but as like a core features or like not like a class wise I'm discussing because I'm mainly working on to make your basics so clear on what the things you are going to learn in future. Okay. I mean, it's not like on tomorrow or towards even. It is good for me if I start the things and I close the things. Okay. My expectation is make the things in an order and you guys get clearly a picture of what is React and all. But after I finish this core features, right? Discussion of this core features, we are going to start working on this data binding. In fact, like after this, I'll start working on creating one static project. Okay. Simple project only with data. Either I may go with Amazon or I may go with Netflix. We'll take one of the application so that we'll see that you'll get a better understanding of how to create a project by combining multiple components. Okay. Event component loading as well client side. Yes, if that's then why it is fast, that will be taken care by React. Are we using server side rendering in the real time? That's what I said, right, Ganesh? I mean, server side rendering, I myself have not started it. In my organization, when we are working, we are not doing any server side rendering. It's only client side what we are working with. Sumant, if you are running components on the server side, what we do in our React app? That is what that's a good question. What Sumant is saying is, okay, if we go with the concept of server side rendering, if the server itself is rendering everything, then what we are going to do in the React? Are we going to show what is being written from the client? If it is a static page, that is fine. But what if like later another component has to be changed? That is what I said, like initial parent component rendering will be done from the server. Remaining all the child's later changes will all be done at the server, client side itself. Okay. That's about the data binding fragment supporting to the router. What do you mean by routing, boss? Very simple concept. Matching the path or matching the component based on the URL. Now my expectation is right now, if you see this component got rendered, but my expectation is I will say something called a slash visiting card. Okay, when I click on this, now the visiting card component has to get rendered. Now I say something called a slash product details. Now when I click on enter, now the product details component has to get rendered. The concept of rendering the concept based on the URL change is called as routing. But right now why it is not rendering? Because I have not used the routing feature. Okay, I will show you in future, but I was just showing that this is one of the core feature what your React is saying, that routing is also being supported. Routing is you are going to load the particular component based on the URL change. And obviously performance, as I said, you compare it to with you all your UI libraries, Angular, Vue.js, Cane.js, Backbone.js, Backbone.js, etc., etc. Comparing with your all other libraries, React performance is too much high. So that is the reason people are mostly opting to go with your React.js than your other libraries. Okay, that is one of the very biggest selling feature of your React. Performance is very high, faster in rendering the components. And conditional rendering. Conditional rendering is React provides a concept of render the content based on the condition. If the user is already logged in, I should not show that logout option. Logout option is also one of the component, but that will not come under the picture if the user is already logged in. If the user is not logged in, show that sign up feature. So based on the conditions, you could able to generate the components. Okay, maybe like after that project is been done, I will start with how do we iterate the content, how do we add the conditions on the on the page. Those all things we'll see. But conditional rendering is a concept which is being supported in your React. And simplicity. Obviously, React is very simple to learn. Now, within just a week of time, are you guys capable of creating the components? Don't say no. Yes, right. I'm not forcing to say yes, but you guys are capable, right? At least with all the day, I mean, everyday examples, whatever we are creating. Now you could able to create one individual component. Now I have just created this two-way data binding component. How much time it took? Are we using any too much of like complex logic or etc. But no, React is very. I'm really telling you guys that is one of the best part what you have React. The two main advantages what you have is learning the React is most faster way you can do and the simplest way. And main other advantage is there are lots of openings to the React. Okay, there are lots of openings to the React at the same time. It is very faster way. So you just grab it and get the things. Then you may ask me a question, then why people are not getting jobs? If it is easy, people would have learned. If it is, there are lots of opening, people would have got the job. But people are not learning, you know, don't learn. Someone asked that you start React. when I'm taking the interviews now, right? I mean, I'm taking interviews for 13 years, 12 years, 10 years, 5 years, 8 years. The main thing what I say, if I ask them what is hook, their exam, they're capable of, what is use effect, what is this React rendering, everybody will tell me this basic definition of it. Because, if you really have to prepare for React, 2 weeks of time, just 2 hours a day, your React will be done. If you really sit on this. But I mean, those things will be just definitions. But you need to know that when to use what based on the dynamic requirements. At the same time, background with the core concepts of your JavaScript. Not every feature. React is a library providing some ready-made things for you. Use it and develop the things. Do you think that every time your requirement in your project will be always what React is providing? No. There could be something which could be a different way, isn't it? Let's take a practical example. I know how to construct. Assume like I'm constructing a building. Now there are some machines have come into the picture where I want to put this pillar. There is a machine. I give this all the raw materials. It gives me a pillar. I will keep it. I want to put a wall. I'll give the raw material. He give the ball. I will take it and I fit it. But what if there is a requirement something like this? There is a wave type of pillar has to be constructed. I cannot say that machine is not providing. I should able to create with my own capability of with all the construction logic. So that is what you need to know. Everybody can construct these pillars, walls, and all. But what if a unique design is coming? At that time, you cannot say that machine is not providing or React is not providing. At that time, your JavaScript skills will be coming. And you need to know how to do that along with your React. So that is what people will expect. So don't only look into the React methods or the concepts, look into all the 360 degrees of it. Okay, and I really appreciate there's a very good unique questions are been coming and so active people are there in the online. Okay, they are all asking, like maybe like assume like he might not think in the way others are thinking. So he has a different question, but they are having some different questions. And all these questions, that is the reason I will make sure all the questions are being answered from the chat. I never skip it. If I mistakenly do that, please rewrite the question again. But I never miss the questions. I'll make sure I'll answer that. Okay, because that is very much important, guys. Like you see, based on the questions only, I'm giving some different examples. Okay. And like yesterday, someone is messaging me, boss, you please don't waste the time by answering all the questions. Here I'm answering the questions. I'm not doing any personal discussions there. And that will really, really help you guys. But yes, you may feel like the chain is breaking, the flow is breaking. Initially, it will happen because right now we haven't yet started. From tomorrow or like day after tomorrow, once we start the concepts, we don't change the break. People will make sure they have the questions related to the topic what we are discussing. Okay, when you add GitHub, sir, when it is possible. Okay, so Sunil, I'm still pending with that. There are like hundreds of mail IDs. I need to copy and do that. I'll do that. I mean, whenever I get some time today, I'll do it. Is React.js support authentication and authorization? Authentication and authorization is the concept which has to be implemented. Anything which is executing within the browser, we can do that. Authentication and authorization. There is nothing like React has predefined components of authentication and authorization, but we can implement it. Can you please tell interview questions simultaneously? Sure, Shivangi. When I'm actually starting with the topics, I'll make sure. Difference between library and framework. You should be able to see in the video. Again, I don't want to repeat and make it bore. Please go through the videos, Ajitesh. Okay, Bhavna, we all are joining in Telegram group. Yes, Sukanya will be helping you on it. Sai Teja, once you show the Git Tortoise installation, simple, right? Go with Google, search for something called as Git Tortoise, click on enter, and you should able to see this guy, tortoisegit.org. And here, once you click on download, it will be providing an option, the operating system and the Windows bit information. Just click on this guy, double click on it, automatic installation will be done. Am I clear, Teja? Any more questions? Okay, I think like I will pause it for today simply. And one final thing, supports both JavaScript and TypeScript. For the React, right? Not React. The main limitation what you have with your Angular is, say for example, he is super expertise in your JavaScript, very much expertise in the JavaScript. Now he want to implement Angular. When he goes there, Angular strictly forces you to only go with the TypeScript. You cannot use the JavaScript over there. So that is one of the main limitation what you have with your Angular. Yes, they are using the TypeScript to make it a data bounded or restricted type of data. But what if like I'm an expertise on your TypeScript? Why do I sorry, expertise on JavaScript? Why do I are forcing me to go with the TypeScript? So that is where Angular loses maximum of its customers. Earlier Angular JS is the one what was there. Later they made it as Angular, which is Angular with only TypeScript. With JavaScript, it's not possible. Now, what React guy logically implemented is I say that I'm going to use the JavaScript only. But if you want to have TypeScript, I have a different flavor. You can even use TypeScript with, React with TypeScript also. So that is where he gained the customers both with TypeScript or with JavaScript. Okay, so that is one of the advantage. They are never restricting that only one particular programming language, but you can go with either TypeScript or JavaScript also. Okay, this is one of the core features. So these all are the pillars of your React JS, which is making React so popular nowadays in the market. Clear, everyone? Okay, I think I'm not saving this guy, right? Let me commit the piece of code. Okay, so let's pause it for today, guys. We'll meet again back on tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will be